Hi there. So, we are still talking about task three, how to get ready for it, and what to do in it. And you should have already watched the first in this series called All About Task Three, Steps One and Two, in order to get ready for this one. So, let's get started. So we have 9 steps that we're going to go through. We've already discussed step 1 and 2, where we've selected an assessment and established the evaluation criteria. We hope to be talking about 2 or 3 more steps. So let's take a look at step 3. Step 3, collect and analyze student work. Now, once you've gotten your assessment prepared and your evaluation prepared, evaluation criteria, then what you want to do is to collect the work and start to analyze it. Now, when I say analyze, I didn't say check it or grade it, because that's a right and wrong type of thing, and that's on lower level blooms, and you need to be using your highest level blooms. It's a little harder. You're going to analyze their work. You're going to be analyzing the whole class data and trying to find patterns of learning. Um, you're going to then find, in a few minutes we'll start talking about work samples. You'll find work samples that demonstrate that pattern of learning. But what is a pattern of learning? It's pretty much what it sounds like it is. After you look at students' work, you can ask yourself, what were some common things that they all seemed to understand? What were some common things that they all seemed to misunderstand or struggle with? And were there any partial understandings? You're going to be looking at this quantitatively and qualitatively. Quantitatively means that you're going to be saying things like 10 out of 15 students or 20% of the students um, did not understand blah, blah, and blah, and blah. But qualitative patterns is a description of understandings or misunderstandings or partial understandings that explain the quantitative patterns. So, for instance, you would take a work sample and say that you said that 85% of the students misunderstood about um, the 3 branches of government. Well, if you've got 85%, that's your quantitative data. Now what you want is an example of that. So you choose a student's piece of work, a work sample that demonstrates that. So you would actually quote or explain what the students did. Student A said this, and that describes the pattern that you're seeing so consistently in your class. So you're going to be analyzing, and once you've done that, you really start to get busy on the big work. So how um, detailed should this be? Well, you're going to first examine the data and the performance of the whole class. And then you're going to get more detailed thinking about the 3 focus students' work samples and looking at their work samples and selecting appropriate examples from the work sample to illustrate the key points of your analysis. And once you've assessed each student's work sample, then you'll present the quantitative and qualitative analysis of these patterns of learning that you've found. So ask yourself these questions. What did many students or most students understand? What were common errors or partial understandings? What, if anything, did students who succeeded or made errors in common have in common with one another? For instance, did you notice a trend among your struggling readers or your strong readers, your English language learners, Was there any strong trends among those? Your response that you're going to have needs to indicate that you understand how well your students have understood the content and what they need to work on. In your analysis, it's very important to address all of your evaluation criteria and all of the bulleted items of the subject-specific handbook. Again, this is something that's not in your prompt 1 of task 3. Prompt 1 does not tell you to analyze student work based on subject-specific emphasis, but it says it here, and this comes from your making good choices. And it makes sense because once you've taken it this far, when you get to the final prompt in the assessment commentary, you've got to talk about next steps in relation to that subject-specific emphasis. Now, your analysis is going to be scored with rubric 11. And rubric 11 for proficient level 3 is that your analysis will focus on what the students did right and wrong. So you will discuss both what they did right and wrong. So this puts you at a proficient level for a beginning teacher. And then you do discuss some differences in the whole class learning. Now, I'm pretty sure all of my students can do better than this. You could do a level 4. And once you have looked at your work and you've analyzed it, you could find 3 patterns of learning and take those 3 patterns and find a work sample that demonstrates each pattern. And then you can use a specific example from that work sample to demonstrate that pattern. And so that would get you a level 4. When you start making those connections about how your specific example really explains or describes the problem that you're seeing quantitatively, then you've got qualitative and quantitative patterns of learning, and you've made big connections, and that will bring you up to a level 5. So here, one of the things that a lot of my students struggle with is that in prompt 1 of task 3, they are asked to analyze with graphs. And with our STEM students, those in math and sciences, they don't worry about this, but a lot of folks who are in English and history and a lot of our elementary folks, their expertise is not in that area, and so they get a little panicky about the graphs. But it can be just as simple as this, and why don't you look how great this is. This person has taken the objective, each of her objectives, and then she's described really the evaluation criteria. And then she, in the chart, just explains, who had mastery, and I can't remember what the levels were, but she's got mastery and then different levels of proficiency here. And so this is just as simple as you can make it. Also, there are plenty of graduate students and math students and science students and my tuition scholars and graduate assistants can all help you in taking data, putting it into an Excel, and will help you in making a chart that looks like this. And this is a good visual for demonstrating, what you're trying to talk about in your narrative. Here's another example. So these are really nice. Good job on that. Here's another student. She took pretty much the same idea. She wrote out the objective, all the different students. She highlighted the students, student 5, 10, and 14 were her focus students. Then she just did above, meets, and below expectations. Again, very good job. So there's lots of different ways to do this. But what you can see through all of them is they're not talking about the number that people got wrong. When you say that a student made a 90%, that is meaningless. That does not do anything but tell us a grade. What we want to know is what they learned and what they didn't learn, what they still need to work on. So you're analyzing learning, and that's a whole different level of understanding and application that we're looking at here. So pay attention to that. Notice too, this person shows mastery of evidence of text. It's not necessarily an objective where she's shortened and given a title to her objective there. Evidence supports the argument of topic sentence. You can see she's got near proficiency, a lot of different things there. So good job on these graphs. It's the type of thing you can do. Here is someone else who's designed it another way. This is one of the things that I suggest to people is that they name their objectives, call it objective 1, objective 2, but also you spell it out somewhere. So here's the explanation for these graphs, which is also a very good job. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about in the next video will be choosing your 3 work samples, how you choose those, and then how you go from choosing those 3 work samples to talking about feedback. And that's a pretty important thing to get, but you want to make sure now that you kind of stop and think about how you're going to use your objectives and your evaluation criteria in order to analyze your work, because now is the time to look critically at your assessment and your evaluative criteria and make sure it's going to work for your needs. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you online again very soon. Have a good day.